the On the Whistle podcast. This is our AFCON wrap show where we come live to you, giving you our hot takes, answering your questions, and interacting with you. As per normal, I'm Zayn Nabbi. I'm your host. I have the privilege of still having my Christmas tree up and star. But our man, who's always on the move, and today I won't steal his thunder, but not only went to one game, but managed to attend two, is the young Alasdair Howorth. He, like a Kenyan middle distance to long distance runner, loves putting in the yards to win the medals. Ali, how are you doing? Let's start there before we dig into the football because there's a lot to. Are you still breathing? Do you still have a pulse?
It, well, I almost ended up having to run between the two games, which was like I don't know 7 or 8 kilometers. So I almost did that. Thankfully, I was able to catch a bus because there was no way of getting like properly out of the first stadium. So I'm back home now, fully refreshed, having enjoyed 2 games of football. Zane, one that was not very exciting but had a wonderful end, and one that was very exciting but perhaps did not have the most exciting end, as I'm sure we'll get into.
All righty. Listen, it only feels right, Ali, to begin with the mighty Super Eagles, the only team to attain perfection in the group stages thus far. Algeria might get there tomorrow. We'll wait and see. 9 points, flying high, and into the round of 16. What is your read on Eric Schall's men?
Yeah, Zane. I mean, it, I was sitting next to someone in the media tribune of the Tunisia Tanzania game, which was going on at the same time, and they kind of turned to me and they said, like, do we need to take Nigeria seriously now? And I was like, no, no, no. And then I thought to myself, do we need to take Nigeria seriously now? I think it's exciting. Look, Nigeria needs some positivity after the World Cup stuff that went on. Obviously, being knocked out by DR Congo, and so it's good to see them winning all 3 games. Have they been convincing in all of them? I would say no. This was probably the most convincing, which is
Mhm.
interesting because it was a very rotated side. Shout out to Ryan Alebioso, right back making his full Nigerian debut. Player at Blackburn Rovers, my team. So super happy to see him getting some minutes and playing the whole game. But also, I think it was good to see some of these other guys getting minutes. Paul Anuachu, who for me has always been a
Mm.
great kind of weapon in your arsenal. When you're struggling, get the big man on, and there is no bigger man than Paul Onuachu. But I think he played superbly today up front with Victor Osimhen, and the man who was the star of the show is the man who I really want to see Niger playing more often, and that's Rafael Onyedinka. I think he's such a talented
Wow. The
player.
two goals,
He's
right?
kind of he scores those 2 goals, and for me, he's kind of the classy operator that Nigeria misses. Yes, he's got the physicality, he's got the kind of box to box energy, but he's that classy operator. I think Iwobi is brilliant. One of my favorite players in the team, but he's not that kind of guy who's breaking forward, creating chances necessarily. Although he's got a couple assists, and I think traditionally some of the other guys in Didi Onyeka, they're hard workers, they're strong guys, but they don't really control games. Whereas I think like Onyedika can really do that. So big positives in, as we always have to frame it. And this is the reality of a 24-team tournament. We can't jump to conclusions, and we just can't jump to conclusions. We have to take things slow. We can't assume things. And look, they were playing a Uganda team that was really down on their luck, Zane, because I
Mm.
was at their game against Tanzania. They should have beat Tanzania. It
Starboy was
is
not
in
the
many ways.
Starboy then.
Exactly. Starboy Alan Okello missed that penalty, and it crushed them, like, because they know that if he scored that, if they won that game, which they should
Yeah,
have won, they would be the ones
in the
going through, not
knockouts.
Tanzania.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously you have the kind of goalkeeping fiasco, and Dennis Onyango comes off. Obviously, he's come out of retirement, so it's no surprise to see that he picks up an injury, can't make it through the game. Jamal Salim comes on, then gets sent off for a foul on Victor Osimhen, and then of course Nafi and Alionzi then has to come on. So we saw all 3 of Uganda's goalkeepers. So yeah, we have to have that context for Nigeria, right? We have to have that context, but I think it's really easy for us to also turn around and say, like, look, they were in a group with a very bad Tunisia team and Tanzania and Uganda. But Zayn, we know this Afcon. We know this Afcon. This is not a tournament for the faint of heart. So I think we have to be positive about Nigeria. Going into the next round. I think they'll be playing Mozambique likely. We don't want to jump the gun. It could be our friend Francis's Cameroon. It could be Cote d'Ivoire for all we know. But I think they're in a good place to start building. Now I think they're on the I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're on the tough side of the draw. There is one very strong side of the draw and one side of the draw that is less
Mm,
strong. So I just want to run you through the teams so far that are on that side of the draw. So Bafana, obviously, who will likely play Cameroon or Cote d'Ivoire. Morocco are in it. Morocco will play Tanzania. You would imagine Morocco win that. Algeria and DR Congo will also then play,
mhm.
and that's who will play Nigeria and or Mozambique if they're the ones. So Nigeria are probably them and Morocco have an easier, gentler step into that kind of difficult group because they play the third seed teams, but that is one tough side of the draw, Zayn, and so
I
you don't
mean,
want to jump the gun with Nigeria, but no one will want to play them either. I
yeah.
think, and they've certainly done better than I thought they would. I didn't think they would win all three games.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you have Algeria, Congo, and Nigeria all on that one side is just
Yeah.
nuts to me. Do you know what I mean?
And then if you get past that, it's Bafana or or Morocco.
Yeah.
Like,
So, I mean, it's like,
whoa.
it doesn't get any
Yeah.
easier.
There is a very clear easy and strong side of the draw. And we'll get into that with the Congo Senegal games because that was
Yeah.
quite a fun kind of dynamic. But yeah, there is very much shaping up a stronger side and less stronger side.
Yeah. Because clearly, the way it's shaping up, it looks like you're going to see Senegal and Egypt maybe meeting in a semi on that side, which, is pretty heavyweight. But yeah, their path is a little bit more clearer. So, Ali, let's go over the games you're at. Where would you like to start first?
Zayn, we have to start with my East African brothers,
Hey,
Tanzania.
listen,
Wow.
your Substack has gone viral, right? Where you did it on why is East African football so bad? And for those of you who want to consume it, if I'm correct, it's Alistair Howorth under the On the Whistle newsletter on Substack. Is that right, Ali?
That is correct.
There we
Zayn, they,
go.
they they read it. Miguel Gamondi read it, and he pinned it up on the dressing room wall, and he said, "This is what this Mzungu, this white man is saying about you. Go out and prove him wrong." And you know what? They didn't. They did prove me wrong. I didn't think they would draw with Tunisia. Now, Zayn, I will say as a Kenyan, I'm, you know, that part of me is always super happy to see East Africans, doing well. I
Of
love
course.
Tanzania. Spent a lot of time there in my childhood, so I'm very affectionate to it. There is a big part of me that is very bitter because Zane, let me take you back to 2019, and I think I've
Oh,
probably
here we
taken you back
go.
to 2019 many times in the last couple of weeks. But Kenya are in a group with Senegal and Algeria, and we know there's no way we're getting a point out of either of those two teams. So there's just that one game against Tanzania. We beat Tanzania. We get 3 points and only minus, what was it? Uh, 2 goal difference, I think, maybe three. There was a hope, there was a chance, and then I think it was Benin who drew all 3 games, so had 3 points, had a better goal difference, and knocked us out. Zayn, I'm very bitter because since that Afcon, right? You had
Yes.
last Afcon where Cote d'Ivoire had a terrible goal difference. What was it, -4, -3,
Yes.
after getting smashed by Equatorial Guinea and losing to Nigeria, and now you have this Tanzania getting out of the group with 2 points,
Two
Zayn.
points.
2 points, Zayn. It's outrageous. But no, I'm super happy. And look, Zayn, massive shout out to Miguel Gamondi, the Argentinian coach. Like he was essentially dropped into this in the beginning of November. Zayn, he
Yes.
he had 2 games to prepare for this, and he's made some very bold tactical choices, really bold, positional choices. He dropped Mbwana Samata, the legend of Tanzanian football, Tanzania's one and only ever superstar. And he dropped him, and he then today he started him, but took him off at halftime, and they were much better in the second half once Abdallah came on. So I think a lot of credit has to go with Miguel Gamondi, and I'm staying with Tanzanian at the moment, and he's kind of very well connected with a lot of people in Tanzania. And he was saying at the beginning of the tournament there was not a lot of good energy around the Tanzania team. It felt like they were just here to come here, pick up the experience. We'll go back and wait until Pamoja. But he was saying you could just tell as things have gone on, the energy has built, the positivity has built. This is a team that's, together, coherent. I met some Tanzanians this morning for breakfast. They were saying, like, look, we're building something here. We're building something here. And look, fair play. They deserve to draw with Tunisia. If anything, they deserve to win because Tunisia's penalty was very, very fortunate. So I think for me, it's huge props to Tanzania. First time they've ever gotten out of the group stage. They're still yet to win a game at the AFCON. So it's remarkable that they got out of the group stage given that. But no, it's an amazing achievement for Tanzania. Very unexpected, but super happy. And look, they get a round in the next match against Morocco, and then like that's gonna be tough. Do I think that they'll
But
get through it?
but let me
No, but
let me
they're
ask
there.
you this, Ali. Is this not also? I mean, everyone's going to expect them to get knocked out and to lose, right? Like that's going to be the expectation. But what what about this being as a shop window, regardless of what happens for Tanzanian football? Because you've often spoken about particularly the investment we're seeing in that part of the world. It's a very engaged football community. And in many ways, this is a success seeing them qualify for the next
Absolutely,
round of
absolutely.
the AFCON. And like South Africa, but maybe a little bit South Africa light, a lot of players who come from that part of the world and those clubs in that league. So that's not all bad news, if that makes any sense.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's really cool to see. And look, what Tanzania have done better this time, right, is 2020-23 they qualify after missing out 2021.
Hmm.
They kind of rushed in and brought all these diaspora players because Tanzania has always been very proud of their history, saying like
Sure.
and proud of the like you saying, this is the country of Yanga and Simba. This is our and we get our players from Tanzania. They represent our club football. We don't take diaspora players. They changed that rule 2023, and they kind of rushed in, brought in like 5 or 6 diaspora players, mostly from England, lower leagues, and they all kind of came, played, and it felt like they were deers in the headlights. That first game,
Mm,
they played their first game against Morocco at the last AFCON, got pumped 3-0, and it just set the negative tone for a tournament that they ended up getting knocked out in. And most of those players were then kind of sent packing, like they haven't played for Tanzania since. And there was this sense that Tanzania was like, okay, nope, we're going back to what we know. There was a couple exceptions, and I want to speak about one. Haji Mnoga, right back from England, who is half Tanzanian, and he started representing Tanzania at around this time. Now, Zayn, I watched him play 3-4 years ago in Chesterfield for Aldershot
what?
in the conference of England English football. So the fifth tier, I watched him play at right back, and I remember watching, and I remember looking up the team sheets, and I had no idea he was there. I had no idea who he was, and I remember looking, I'm like, Noga, wow, that's a Tanzanian name if I've ever seen one. That's an East
Mm,
African name. Like, what is going on? Haji Mnoga. He has to be Tanzanian. Looked him up. Then I saw that he'd been called up. He had he had a difficult Ivorian tournament, but he's come back. He's been brilliant. And today's game, there was this amazing moment where, because at many times in this game, he was playing at right wing back in the back five. He was their kind of outlet on that right side, particularly in the first half when they didn't have much else going.
mm.
And there was this one moment where Hannibal Mejbri, obviously playing at Burnley, former Man United player, terrific talent, has had an excellent AFCON. He comes over and Haji Mnoga just bounces him. Like Haji has the ball and just throws him off. And I thought, wow, this is the fifth tier. Well, now he plays at Salford. So I think now the fourth tier of English football going up against a Premier League former Man United player. And he just sent him packing. And I thought, wow, this is the AFCON. Like we don't care about your pedigree. We don't care where you've come from. If you step up for your country, you're going to be loved and you're going to perform. And so I just wanted to give that little anecdote because I think it's kind of represents Tanzania's fighting spirit at this tournament. I think they have been up for it, even if they haven't
Yes.
necessarily been a great team. They have fought and they've done well.
Yeah. Well, listen, Ali, that is a fantastic anecdote. I'm so glad you went there. And for those of you who are with us, listen, we've got about 15 minutes left. Populate the chat with your comments. You can do it later. We'll get to it. We'll get to the mailbag at the end of the show. But join this debate discussion now. We are Africa's biggest braai, and we love to hear from you. I got to say, Ali, we want to get to your next game because that's going to be vitally, vitally important to get your takeaways on that. But as we look at this tournament, as we look at this bracket, I'm going to slip in a question about Bafana. Do you think there's any way that Ivory Coast finish second in Group F?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. It's because look, Mozambique beat Gabon in that thriller, so that Mozambique have locked in that third place. Gabon
Hmm.
cannot come third; they're knocked out. But
Head
this
to
is
head,
Gabon
yeah.
we're talking about. This is still a good team. This is still a Emirate Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and Zayn, I also wouldn't rule out potentially Mozambique being the team against you. Look, they've shown
Wow,
that
that's
they're a very,
bold.
very good team. They were
That's
good
bold.
against
They're good,
they were
but
good
I don't
against
know.
Cote d'Ivoire.
Uh,
They were good against Cote d'Ivoire. They have a very solid team. They have a strong identity. Could they beat could they beat Cameroon? Look, if this was Cameroon of a few years ago, I would say actually maybe Mozambique are my favorites. David Pagu's Cameroon is a little more serious and they've done well. But I wouldn't, yeah, honestly, I wouldn't. I think for instance, we assumed that Tanzania would lose to Tunisia, and I think that was a mistake. And I don't think we should assume that either. I would be very surprised if both Cote d'Ivoire and Cameroon won.
mm,
Now, look, Cote d'Ivoire are still my favorites. I think they're the stronger team. I think even that Cameroon game, they were the better team. Cameroon did well, but you know, so I think still my money would be on Cameroon being the ones you guys will play.
all right, Ali, let's get to the next game you attended. Takeaways, brother.
Yeah, so then I had to hop on the bus. Was only like 10 minutes late, getting across Rabat to get to the Congo versus Botswana game. First of all, Zayn, you know, shout out to I just want to I'll say this very quickly because Botswana are probably the most unknown quantity coming into this
Yeah.
Afcon. Um, but the one quantity that we do know quite well because I trying to remember if we've had him on the podcast. I've certainly interviewed him, and I think it was for the podcast. It was head coach Morena Ramaraboli, South
Mm,
African, but has spent a lot of time in Botswana. He
yes.
he brought Joanna and Galaxy. He won them a couple
Yes.
titles in Botswana, and then took them to the CAF Champions League group stage, knocking out Simba from Tanzania in the qualifiers. Huge accomplishment. A year later, they didn't qualify for the CAF Champions League, but in the CAF
Hmm.
Champions League qualifiers, they did knock out Orlando Pirates. So this guy's pedigree in terms of knocking. And then in the group stage, I think they got a draw against Esperance. So like, done brilliant stuff at Botswana. I think he won the Kosafa Cup with Bafana's B team. So
Hmm.
he then came back and did very well with South Africa. And I was just struck. I kind of spent a lot of time in that Congo Botswana game watching him and watching Sebastian de Sabra, and he was so Matt Remmer Bully comes across as this very grumpy man. When you interview him, he's just he looks like he doesn't want to be there.
Hmm.
He's a very grumpy guy, very grouchy South African. But on the touchline, I just thought his demeanor was so good. He was encouraging the Botswanan players. He was demanding stuff from them. He was kind of building them up and help. And I think that's such a great skill to have when you're coaching a team that is essentially a lost cause. Botswana were never gonna best case in this group they were gonna get a draw against Benin. So and they were always gonna get pumped by Congo and Senegal. So it was sad to see them go out with a whimper, but it's the type of thing that okay, this was a bad run for Botswana, but the first or second Afcon appearance always is. Maybe they'll come back and Ramaraboli. Don't be surprised if he makes some big waves with Botswana or maybe back in South Africa. Now Congo, Zayn, wow,
That's listen. I
Congo,
can't talk enough about them, right? And the fact that they were putting up the goals really turned on the pressure for Senegal, which was fantastic.
100%. This was one of these great like
Mhm.
everyone's checking their phones. At one point, I looked to the bench and I think was it Axel Tuanzebe who was on the bench for Congo, having been rested. He was looking, I think, at his family in the stands and kind of motioning like 2-0, 2-0, and then trying to figure out what the set because he doesn't have his phone, so he's trying
Of
to figure out
course.
what the Senegal score is. And there was this brilliant moment where I had a friend who was at the Senegal game texting like, Senegal, I like, it's 1-0. Congo are winning 3-0 at this point, and then Fiston Maele scores. I'm texting Fiston Mayele goal, da 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 da. And then suddenly it's like, oh no, VAR. And then he texts, no, Habib Diallo scored. Okay, Senegal are suddenly winning. And then the Fiston Mayele goal was ruled out. So this great kind of ding dong battle in terms of, Congo and Senegal kind of both looking over their shoulders at each other, being like, we need to score because Zayn, we talked about the bracket. The difference it makes being in the one side versus the other is night and day, because Senegal's bracket now, right? Because they won Group D. Senegal's bracket now, they play Sudan. Okay, Sudan. One of the stories of the tournament, them even just being here, they're not expected to do much. You expect Senegal to cruise past that, and they get to stay in Tangier.
Yes.
Then they play either Mali or Tunisia. Now, Mali have proven that they're very, very stubborn side, as Ton Sampie has shown, but they also have not been very dangerous. 3 draws from 3, including draws with a very important Zambian side and the Comoros. Tunisia, I would say, have been even worse. So it's like, okay, neither of those are super heavyweights. So Senegal are suddenly, you've got 2 very clear steps, and suddenly you're in the semifinal. And Zayn, that semifinal is in Tangier. Senegal will stay in Tangier, their base, for the entirety of the tournament until the final, if they reach there. And then in that semifinal, that's when they play, Egypt or potentially Ivory Coast, or, one of these teams, or potentially Burkina Faso, whoever gets there. So it was a huge win for Senegal to get over the line. It was a huge shame for Congo. You could really see the stadium, like the fans and the players were all so anxious. Like you look to the bench, there was Cedric Bakambu and Wan-Bissaka and Noah Sadiki before he came off the bench, and they're all kind of like, they look so anxious, and every missed shot, they were like kind of, it felt like it was kind of life or death, because I think they kind of acknowledged that, because now if we look at Congo's run, right, they have to beat an Algeria side that is looking really, really good. If they beat them, then they have to beat a Nigeria team that we've just been talking about is suddenly revitalized. And then if they beat that, you're playing likely Morocco, maybe Bafana, maybe Cameroon. So that is suddenly an incredibly, like, if you are on that side of the draw, particularly if you're Algeria, Bafana, Congo, or potentially Cameroon, it's almost impossible to win the AFCON from this point, because it's, we talk about the best teams at tournaments. The draw helps. Draw matters. The draw is so important. And those guys all have, sadly for you guys, because you needed to win that group, you have such a tough draw, and it is going to be a long run. And look, let's reflect. 2021, Senegal had a terrible group stage, right? They scored 1 goal, 5 points, 2 draws.
Yes.
Dreadful. But they had a very easy run to the final. I think, what was it, Cape Verde? Was it Cape Verde? Someone, maybe Mali, I can't remember. Burkina Faso, and then Egypt in the final. They had a very, or no, Equatorial Guinea, I think it was, in the quarterfinal. So it was, Cape Verde, Equatorial Guinea, Burkina Faso, and then into the final. So those things do matter. Now, does that mean that Senegal are the favorites to win? In my opinion, yes, it does. It does make them the favorites to win, because that draw matters. Doesn't mean they will win, not necessarily, because as we've seen at the last AFCON, they had their best ever group stage in the AFCON history, and lo and behold, Cote d'Ivoire beat them. Who is the potential team that they might play in the semifinals? Their bogey team, Cote d'Ivoire. So I think whatever it is, Zayn, what struck me about this AFCON, right, is it's not been as exciting a group stage as the last 2 AFCONs. We have to say that, because the last 2 AFCONs delivered up some brilliance in the group stage, particularly in Cote d'Ivoire, when you had that bonkers Egypt, Ghana, Mozambique, Cape Verde group. It was just it was just delightful. The Cameroon last gasp winner against Gambia. We don't have any of that in this tournament, sadly. There's been hardly any upsets in any capacity. But Zayn, what that means is that I genuinely don't know if we've ever had such a heavily stacked knockout stage. So many strong teams. I think all 6 of the group winners are incredibly strong. You throw in Bafana, you throw in DR Congo into that. This is a serious AFCON knockout stage we're looking at.
Well, 2 things for me to say before we sort of look to get to the final 5-6 minutes of the show. And the one is just to make mention, Ali, we talk about how tight it was between Senegal and DRC to claim the top of that group, right, in Group D. But I mean, for me, the Sheriff India's penalty, uh, I don't know, man. That looked a little soft to me. And I think the commentators hinted as much. So, I mean, look, wasn't overruled, it went ahead. And maybe it's going to be a footnote rather than a headline. But if you're the DRC, you'd look at that and go, oh, man, should have been a bit closer
You'd be a
than
bit
that.
frustrated. Yeah.
Secondly,
And look,
yeah, go on.
DRC played well. I'll say that they again like a couple of the other teams rotated very heavily. And Zayn, one of the joys of that is we got to see Gail Kakuta, the little magician himself. He wasn't even meant to be coming to this tournament. He wasn't selected, but an injury let him come in, and he got the start today. And oh, Zayn, look up that assist. Anyone who's not seen it, for their first
Sure.
goal, the back heel into Nathaniel Mbuku, and then he scores. Ah, it was just a joy to watch. Brilliant penalty, and then he scores again once Teo Bongonda comes off the bench. So I think what's that shown is DRC, very strong team. They have a lot of depth. Are they the most creative and attacking team? No. Sebastian Desabre has shown time and time again that he's a defense first coach, and that's what you need to be at the AFCON. But when you look back at their group stage, one goal conceded, and that was a Sadio Mane shot off a rebound. DRC are not going to be an easy game, but also Algeria are incredible at the moment. They
Sure.
look so good. So that game for me is just, we're going to be eating that day, Zane, that when Algeria and DR Congo play each other.
Absolutely. Well, listen, let me get up some viewer comments because this is why we're here. We want you around the braai. We have Francis Bako hyphen VB9BS say Cameroon will play to 1-1 draw. That's in reference to obviously their game with Mozambique coming up. And then I said, so the Mambas will strike? And he's responded, or she's responded, saying, sure. And it would be an equalizer. So thank you so much for that comment. We've got your prediction. And if you have any more going into the final day for Group E, Group F, populate them in now. We'd love to include them. Ali, something we love to do on the pod is we love to get questions and comments from people. We obviously did a show yesterday. And one of the talking points from yesterday's pod was our discussion point around the comments that Hugo Bruce, the Bafana coach, had made about the tournament maybe not having the right vibe that it's had in previous tournaments. And we had at how do I say that? As Prostagma, one say in the comments, coming from a place of friendship. Of course, you're on the braai. It's always fun around the braai. Point one. Why are we feeding this North versus others narrative? This is a moment of unity. The country did their best. Why all the negativity? I'm hearing contradictory points on the lack of security and over policing, lack of atmosphere, and full stadiums. ... Point two, is Hugo Bruce really the person we want to debate? I can't help but see the racial undertow of his remarks. This type of people often feel unsafe around North Africans. And point three, thanks for adding the outline to the video. It's easier to track. On the latter point, I'll respond and say, thank you. That's more than welcome. We like to get our metadata, as boring as it is late. But just your comments on, are we feeding here into a North versus others debate? And, your take on Hugo's comments. I mean, do you think they come from a place of genuine concern about atmosphere, or could there be something more, to them than that?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because yeah, you want to push back against these kind of narratives of North versus South, whilst also acknowledging cultural realities and differences, and you also don't want to throw in, you know, yeah, it's not as simple as that, and it's you also don't want to be guilty of just seeing sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa as two separate monoliths, right? Like Cameroon is a very different country to Cote d'Ivoire, and I think the experience of the AFCON there was very different, and we need to make sure we make that distinction. Same with Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda for the next AFCON. I think we can show insight into what it was like in Cote d'Ivoire versus what it was like here in Morocco without making it some North African versus Sub-Saharan African kind of debate or war or whatever it is. Because I think North Africans will tell you very much so that Egypt, it was a very different tournament to Morocco, and they're very different
Yes.
countries, and so I think it's important to highlight. I think as well as it's very important to highlight all the brilliant things, like the brilliant stadium infrastructure and things like that. But I think it's also important that we, do our job, because Zayn, you and me, we're not content creators. We're not here to
We're,
make content.
we're,
We're journalists.
we're journalists first and foremost, as boring as that sounds.
Exactly.
We love our craft.
Exactly. And so we can't just, take the party line and say, oh, this is amazing, this is not amazing, this is great, this is not great. Whatever the party line is we have to question it. We have to. And so I think, particularly for me, look, I love Morocco. I realized I've spent more time in Morocco in my adult life than any other country outside of the United Kingdom.
Oh wow.
So it's a country I've spent a lot of time in because of football.
Well, definitely not
Um,
more than Kenya either, right?
no, in my adult life.
Sorry, your
I
adult
said,
life.
yeah. Yeah, sorry, in my adult life. No, definitely not if you include my childhood. So it's a country I'm no expert, not super familiar with it, but I have spent a lot of time here. And I think it's important that we give the full picture of Morocco
Yeah.
for better and for worse, right?
Uh,
I think we need
Agreed.
to we need to, whilst we need to acknowledge that you have amazing stadiums and great atmospheres in the stands, you have to acknowledge that fans are, the energy is not necessarily good in the streets and as good, and you don't notice the AFCON, or from a
Yes.
journalistic perspective that colleagues are being, have been detained for taking pictures in public. These are the reality of being in a country like this, and
Mhm.
we need to highlight it. We need to highlight the good and the bad. And yeah, but I agree, we need to be very careful, because so easily in African circles, particularly, when you're entering dialogue that's within and without the continent, you need to be very careful in the way we discuss it, because it's so easy to rely on tropes.
Yeah.
It's so easy to fall back on very lazy ideas. So I think we should be called out, and we should be held to high standards.
So we're gonna get to a few more comments before we wrap up the show, Ali. I hope you can stay with us for 5 more minutes. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, some of the comments coming in. Let me get them on screen. We had Joseph Adebayo say, I think Morocco will not make it past the semifinals. Let me remind you of the bracket. Right now, they play Tanzania, then they play against South Africa or Cameroon in the quarters. And then they're on track to either play Algeria, Ivory Coast, not Ivory Coast, sorry, DRC or Nigeria, potentially in a semi. I guess you're potentially saying, Joseph, they're going to run into Nigeria and get knocked out by them. Is that what you're seeing? If so, put a comment, let us know, clear it up. Or are you saying Algeria are going to be the team that might knock them out? They're North African neighbors, right?
Well, see, Zayn, and that's my point. I think for me, the team that has impressed me the most at this tournament is Algeria. But I would be very surprised if Algeria won this tournament, because their draw
Yes.
is just so tough. Like, for you to have to beat all of these teams, and Morocco is to a lesser extent, but they still, there's such a tough run.
DRC and
So
then Nigeria
yeah,
and then Morocco or Bafana. It's a
yeah,
pretty hard run
yeah, yeah,
before you get
such
to
a hard
Senegal
run.
or Egypt, potential
Yeah,
Ivory Coast, right?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it is such a tough AFCON, in terms
Yeah,
of the caliber of teams
yeah.
on offer.
And then we have a comment from Nikhil Barjwaja and
Niger
Niger.
no they carry last.
Defense still looks shaky, including Mr. Nobali. We've spoken about it. I mean, that is potentially an Achilles heel right there.
Absolutely. And this is why I can't fully trust Nigeria, because although they've been one of the most exciting teams to watch, they've had some of the best games in terms of chances and action. They've not controlled games. And they've been open. That first 70 minutes against Tunisia was probably the best of any team so far at the tournament. And then the 20 minutes at the end was one of the worst. So, we can't trust Nigeria. We've spoken about Nwabali and how he's been an amazing servant, but yeah, he's not the most trustworthy. This defense is not the most trustworthy,
You'd
especially
feel
when you're
more
missing
confident with
such.
Ronwen Williams or Bonu being in goals, right? You'd feel
Yeah,
more better with
exactly.
that.
Yeah,
Or Nana
and
if he was
again,
at
it's
the tournament. Yeah. Although
exactly.
Nana's had his
And
gaps in Europe, but
yeah, well, yeah, and look, I don't want to knock Nwabali because actually, particularly the last AFCON when he had
yes,
so much criticism from Nigeria, he stepped up and he didn't really put a foot wrong. But yeah, you have to say he's not an elite goalkeeper. He isn't, and Nigeria's defense has not been elite so far. And they've conceded goals that they shouldn't have. They've been a bit leaky, which is why for me it's like, okay. I also, on the other side of that, is Zayn is very reminiscent to me of the 2021 AFCON. Nigeria looked very good, particularly going forward, won all 3 of their games, beat the other big team in their group, which was Egypt that time. And we were all thinking, okay, whoa, like Nigeria are kind of
they're
cooking.
back.
And then they lost immediately in the round of 16
Yeah.
to Tunisia 1-0. So, I don't want to get ahead of myself with Nigeria. I don't trust myself to get excited about Nigeria just yet.
Well, listen, Ali, I think, that's where we're going to, there's one last comment we will take. And it is from Joseph. And Joseph has said, we're just going to get it on screen as our final parting shot. Lol, I would like Nigeria to go far, but my optimism is tempered. If either Nigeria or Algeria makes it that far, either can beat Morocco. I still don't think they have been trophy worthy. Well, listen, we love to hear from you. We're wrapping up now, so just keep populating. Keep your comments coming. We can get back to it. We're gonna let Ali rest up. He's had a long day. He's still got lots of work to do tonight and tomorrow. And for those listening out there, please look us up, OTW_podcast on X, on Instagram and TikTok. And of course, just search for the On the Whistle podcast on YouTube and Facebook. Ali, it's been a pleasure chopping it up. We'll be back here tomorrow night. Stay well, my friend. And for those of you out there, thank you for joining African football's biggest bride.